When were you diagnosed with diabetes?
1979.
1979. And did you have any symptoms? What were the symptoms?
Yes, they were extraordinary loss of weight, and the ordinary ones, the unbelievable thirst all the time, loss of weight, thirst, and exhaustion. I was tired all the time.
Right. And did that
always walk to and from work, and I was in London, and I was doing a radio version of A Delicate Balance, Edward Albee's play that I did later in New York, and with Irene Worth, the actress Irene Worth, and I found myself halfway walking from the Savoy to the BBC. I would hail a cab, which was very unlike me, but it was because I was so tired suddenly. And then Irene Worth, the actress that I was working with, called my attention. She said, "Elaine, I don't think you look well." And I said, "Thanks a lot," kidding her. And then she said, "And do you realize that since 10 o'clock this morning, and it's only noon, you've had 6 Coca-Colas?" Which meant that I was quenching my thirst with the wrong kind of thing, of course. I was drinking Coca-Colas loaded with sugar. And so my blood sugar was... So she suggested I go to the infirmary in the BBC in London, and I did, and they took my blood and told me to call my doctor right away, or they called my doctor and said she's got her blood sugar 490. And so they admitted me into the hospital and to the London clinic, and I was diagnosed with diabetes.
Now, was that a shock? Because a lot of people nowadays...
Well, no, I didn't realize the seriousness of it. I really didn't. I'd heard about it when I was a kid, about sugar diabetes, as they called it. But, anything that was treatable, I was okay with. It didn't scare me at all. I said, well, give me whatever it takes to make me better, and tell me what I have to do, and I'll do it.
Now, you were a type 1 diabetic, which is insulin shots.
Yes, I had child's diabetes, which is very unusual.
Right. Was there any hard transition into knowing when you should take the shots, or any fear of needles or anything like that at that point?
I didn't. I made up my mind that I would not use needles on myself, so they started to teach my husband how to do it, and I didn't, as far as I was concerned, if I was going to have to take injections, I'd go to a hospital and live in the hospital and pretend like I was doing a Betty Davis movie. And my husband would come and see me, and it was ridiculous. I was so terrified. But I had a Japanese nurse, I remember it so well, who taught me how to use the needle, and she did it very well. And suddenly it's gotten to be like brushing my teeth.
Just part of your everyday life.
You do what you have to do, and I'm not a quitter. I mean, you tell me what I have to do to take care of a problem I have, and I will do it.
Right. During one of those times when you have to use insulin or a needle, what is the feeling after that? Because, I don't know if people realize what the feeling is like, how you know that it's time to do that.
How I know what it's time to do what?
To level out your blood sugar. Do you feel tired or weak, or...?
Oh, you mean to know when I need insulin?
Right.
Well, you do by trial and error. You test it in the hospital. I was fortunate enough to have a hospital that let me stay long enough to know how to take care of myself. And taking my blood glucose, I take it 6 to 8 times a day. I don't take any chances with hypoglycemic attacks. So there's no question about knowing when you need insulin if you take your blood 6 to 8 times a day. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Oh, yeah.
If it's low, you don't take any insulin. If it's high, you take a little insulin.
Right. In the aspect of that, because obviously that's something you didn't do before the diagnosis, how would you say diabetes changed your life? The day after compared to the day before the diagnosis?
I think it was very instrumental in having me stop drinking.
Oh, really?
Oh, yes.
Yeah. There's a very, poignant story in the Elaine Stritch at Liberty.
Yes, there certainly is.
Yeah, and if you haven't seen that, all our listeners need to go out and rent that, see that Emmy winner, Tony winner. But what is the kind of the crux of that story, without going through the whole thing, without people who haven't seen it? How did those two things kind of overlap? The alcoholism,
the diabetes, and the alcohol.
Yeah.
Well, I was trying to control my drinking, so I was having 2 drinks a day. But that is pointless. You can't do. If you're an alcoholic, you can't live on 2 drinks a day. It's the old joke in AA: who wants 2 drinks? I don't want 2 drinks. I want 11.
Right.
So that doesn't work after a while, and it gets to be 3, and then 4, and so I got back to the Carlisle here, and then the story is in my show. I had a violent, major hypoglycemic attack, and my life was saved by a minibar waiter that happened to be on my floor, and they gave me a Pepsi-Cola, and it brought me around. And the next day, I made up my mind that I was going to stop drinking, because the drinking is what brought on the hypoglycemic attack.
Right. Do you feel kind of if that hadn't happened, do you think that you would have ever come to the realization of the alcoholism?
Oh, yes, of course. Of course.
Eventually,
especially with diabetes, I would have come to the conclusion, because it would have caused trouble with the diabetes.
Right.
You can't, even controlled drinking is not good. Drinking is no good for diabetics.
Right.
And, some stupid doctors that tell diabetics, oh, you can have 1 or 2 drinks a day. I don't think you can. A substance like alcohol changes your attitude towards everything. You'll eat wrong. You won't take your medicine in time, your insulin.
Right.
You'll eat whatever you want because liquor just frees you, makes you do exactly what makes you happy.
Right. I had read recently.
Or what makes you unhappy in the final analysis.
Yeah, it kind of all brings unhappiness.
Yeah.
I had read something recently, I just kind of wanted to get your feeling on it as a diabetic, that a lot of people go undiagnosed with type 2 diabetes because it's not terminal cancer, it's a progressive illness. Do you feel that's a main part on why diabetes doesn't get a lot of press, where cancer does and other things do, that are kind of quick?
I think people are unfamiliar with what diabetes actually is and the seriousness of it. I am a diabetic, and it took me years to realize how serious a disease it was.
Right.
And I think that it's becoming more and more recognizable as one of the major causes of death.
Right. Well, I think I actually got a statistic that 2/3 of diabetics don't realize that stroke and heart disease are a major part of diabetes, and
Absolutely.
Also 2/3 of diabetics die from heart disease.
Absolutely. But they're finding out, and they're making diabetics much more aware of it these days.
Right.
I think it's on I think it's on the road to it really being successful.
Right.
The aid to diabetes. I really do think it's becoming more vogue-ish, if you will.
Mm-hmm. Right. I think because maybe so many people are being diagnosed with it.
Yes,
it's coming around.
And because of the attention of the fears and the harms of obesity that's taken over in this country.
Right. Yeah.
That's brought diabetes to the floor, I think.
Right. Now, most people in their job have to deal with diabetes day to day, week to week. Now, as a performer, has diabetes affected your performing life?
Well, it certainly has. I have to be very, very responsible. I've only had one occasion where my blood sugar dropped while I was on the stage, and I never want it to happen again. But it was really unpredictable. I was okay when I went out there. I'd taken my blood sugar, and I never take insulin before I go on the stage. Never. Unless my blood sugar should shoot up very high, then I take a couple of hours regular to bring it down, so that I won't be so exhausted, because high blood sugar makes you so lowish and lifeless. So if it's really very high, I take a couple of hours before I go on the stage. But as a rule, I take my insulin when I come off of the stage at night, and then I eat my dinner, so that I have no fear of bringing that disease out onto the stage, if you know what I mean.
Right. Does it kind of become just another thing in life? I mean, I remember from seeing the Elaine Stritch Liberty documentary on HBO that it was actually on one of the lists in your dressing room before the show. Check blood sugar.
Oh, absolutely.
So does it just become another thing like check, hair, check makeup, check diabetes, check blood sugar?
Well, with the exception it's a little more serious than checking your lipstick.
Right. Did you ever have denial? It seems like a lot of people do. They say, I'll get through it because it's not making me fall apart right now, so I'll eat the candy bar.
Yes, I think so. I think that's a temptation to not do as you're told, not eat right. I think eating right is the hardest thing that accompanies diabetes. And learning how to count your carbohydrates.
Right. And
for instance, I was well into several years of being a diabetic before I realized that not carbohydrates. What's the opposite of carbohydrates? What am I trying to say? Proteins.
Proteins.
That they have carbohydrates in them as well.
Right.
I never realized that spinach had carbohydrates in it. that chicken had carbohydrates in it. Am I saying the right word, protein? No, I don't think so.
Well, I don't know if proteins have some carbohydrates,
The
but it's
opposite of carbohydrates. What am I trying to say? I guess
sure.
it is protein.
I think it is, yeah.
A very good doctor finally told me that I have fruit a lot of the times to balance with my insulin. But fruit should be accompanied by something with protein, like cottage cheese or,
Right.
something stable like that, not just the carbohydrates.
Right. So
a mixture of both of them. And I think that's hard to really learn how to be educated in the care of diabetes, so you do the best you can. I've cottoned on to it now.
Right.
And I'm taking a new insulin, which seems to be agreeing with me, and that is Lantus.
Oh.
Just a 24-hour.
Right. So it's just kind of a balancing act.
Yes, it certainly is, and it's not the trick of the week. It's hard.
Right. Do you ever foresee...
And exercise. Jesus, that makes such a difference.
I'd like to kind of talk about, how did you know, diabetes without exercise, how different does it feel than diabetes with exercise?
Your blood sugar is harder to control when you don't exercise.
Mm-hmm.
And you can eat more, not that you want to eat a lot of food, but you can eat a little more normally when you exercise.
Mm-hmm.
And it won't shoot up.
Right.
If you just have your carbohydrates during the day and you don't exercise at all, your blood sugar is going to be high.
Right.
Because you're doing nothing but to bring it down.
Right. Yeah, being a diabetic for well over 20 years now, has age played a part in that? Does age play any kind of part in that, in being able to regulate or slow down or speed up or anything?
Well, I think you tend to gain a little weight when you get older.
Mm-hmm.
And I hate that, so I tend to want to exercise more to keep my weight down. And I have to watch it so that I don't diet strenuously, because that's no good for it either, for your diabetes. It is all a matter, you said it, it's all a matter of balance.
Right.
And yes, getting older affects everything, Scott, so it would necessarily affect your diabetes.
Right.
Make it a little harder to handle with age.
Right. In the end, how would you kind of summarize the last 20 years as being a diabetic and dealing with it day to day? Has it been easy? Has it been hard?
Pain in the ass.
Pain in the ass.
Pain in the ass, and royal pain in the ass, but with all kinds of struggle, they bring some good stuff as well. And it's taught me the joy of discipline.
Mm-hmm.
It's taught me how to really be satisfied with myself by looking after myself. And looking after yourself with diabetes is a 24-hour-a-day job.
Mm-hmm. One more question I forgot to ask. Have you ever had a problem with circulation? That seems to be a major problem.
Sure, absolutely.
With diabetes?
Yeah, and exercise is the cure for that.
Cure for that one?
Cure, but you know what I mean.
It helps it out.
Yes, it certainly does.
Helps it along.